2 of the 2025 Recap Special episode. If you still have not listened to the first part, you can find it in all your favorite platforms. We hope you enjoy. Throughout the year, we have not only explained the different regions of geopolitics, but we have also started a series investigating how natural resources impact global geopolitics. And we started it with crude realities. In this article, we learned that petroleum became the most important substance, not just for energy, but for also all sorts of manufacturing purposes, such as clothing, polyester, or heavy machinery with synthetic rubber. It became worldwide, particularly after World War II. The US was the original undisputed leader of oil production prior to World War II, but this was something that changed during the decolonization, and other players such as Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, or Iran became key actors for international oil markets. In this case, nowadays, and why it's really important for us as well, Russia's yearly budget had a critical dependence of sales of crude oil to the European Union until the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And now, with most EU countries fully detached from Russian oil and the sanctions imposed, Moscow has been selling to third states below market prices thanks to their shadow fleet. The situations have been tough for Europeans, and it will continue to be, as Europe does not have its own crude oil resources. However, Matt, what can you tell me about this shadow fleet and why has it been important this year?
So, I want to start with sanctions because probably everyone has heard that a US-led sanctions have started since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And I did an article on oil for the Pickle, and I learned that, there's sanctions not an embargo. It's not basically that countries are not allowed to buy oil from Russia. Essentially what happens is that Western allies put a price cap on Russia's oil. So let's say a barrel of oil goes for $100 on a market. I don't know if that's right, but just go for it for the example. The sanction basically says that Russia is only allowed to sell their oil at, let's say, $50. So a significant decrease in terms of profits. This does a couple things. It takes away Russia's profits, which can then fund its economy, which funds the war, but it also keeps global prices stable. There's a reason we haven't seen a massive spike in oil prices throughout these last 3 or 4 years, is because the sanctions only target what Russia is allowed to sell on the open market. Now, of course, Russia is not going to take this line down because they're so dependent on oil sales. So they've done a couple things. One is they found partners that aren't supporting the sanctions. And their biggest buyers of their oil at whatever price Russia wants to pay, not sanctions-based, is China, it's India, and it's even to a lesser extent Turkey. So India's almost 50% of it, China's at 1/3, and Turkey's around 10%. So they're trying to find other buyers that are basically not in this sanction regime sort of scheme that the US and the West have been trying to do. The other thing that they're doing is what's called the shadow fleet, which honestly sounds like a really cool name. So whoever came up with that, kudos to them. That's great branding. Essentially what they're doing is, in international trade shipping, a lot of times the goods that are being transported are, even if they're from one country of origin, that country is flying a flag of a different or third-party nation. Maybe it's because they're incorporated there for just easier tax purpose or whatever it is. But it's a long and complicated mechanism that I'm not even fully grasping on. So I'm just kind of giving the basics. But basically, just because something's coming from one country doesn't mean they're flying that country's flag. So what Russia has done is basically tried to purchase these really old, out-of-date tankers that are almost being decommissioned from third parties. So let's say from the global south, they're basically trying to find these tankers that are not attached to Russia, such that they're not counted, quote unquote, as Russian oil. So even if there's Russian oil on them, if these shadow fleet tankers are coming from a third-party nation, then that third-party nation, meaning Russia in disguise, can still sell its oil at the exact market price and essentially go around the sanctions. Now, of course, there's countermeasures to this, right? There are people and countries dedicated to figuring out, whether the ships that are stopped, for example, that they have to go from St. Petersburg past Finland, past Denmark, past Norway. These are kind of gaps that local countries and their coast guards can stop these tankers and figure out, is there actual Russian oil on board, or is it actually from a country that's not under sanction? So it's this cat and mouse game that Russia is playing with kind of some old technology. So it's not an ideal solution for them. This is not some amazing trump card workaround, but it is basically they're trying to put on a cloak. They're a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you will, pretending that they're another country so they can sell their oil at actual prices. This obviously is not nearly as efficient. It's not nearly as economically viable because they'd rather just be selling oil in the open market without any sanctions. But still, it is a reason why, even though the sanctions on Russia have been devastating, it's a reason. There's still a reason why Russia's economy is able to keep going, because they're trying to find these workarounds, either partners who don't care about sanctions or shadow fleets where countries are maybe willing to look the other way and still buy Russian oil for the same price, even though they know it's coming from Russia, despite it flying a flag from Guinea or Angola or Namibia or wherever else, that are basically kind of sell these flags to fly and essentially pretend they're from other countries. So that's a long explanation of a shadow fleet, and it's really tricky, and it is an ongoing story, right? This is not something that has been solved. It is, like I said, a cat and mouse game between countries that are willing to try to police this, buyers that actually care about sanctions rather than kind of looking the other way and buying it maybe at a small discount, and Russia being able to keep up these old tankers. I mean, there is some environmental disaster waiting to happen because these tankers are not state of the art, right? So if they crash and a massive amount of oil spills, again, the loser is the environment, while Russia's trying to play this geopolitical cat and mouse game.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this also one of the reasons that the Trump administration has given for seizing the cargo ship in the oil ship in the coast of Venezuela?
In Venezuela, I don't know that they've given that explanation, but sometimes their explanations change by the hour, so maybe they would be saying that. As far as I know, I think Trump was even asked like what they're going to do with the oil, and
Yes.
in a classic Trump response, he was just like, I don't know, I guess we just keep it. Like, he clearly hasn't thought this through. And maybe we keep the oil. I don't know what we do with it. But that would be interesting if it was that connection, because there is a Russia-Venezuela connection for sure.
Yes.
Those countries often fly together because they're both kind of pariah states in the world. But I don't know if that's quite a shadow fleet. That would be an interesting connection, and I think a lot of people would change their minds if we caught a Russian shadow fleet versus just seized a Venezuelan tanker.
That would be really interesting. Well, about oil, if you want to read more, we have our article, and obviously this is the most known natural resource that we use for everything, and we've all lived through some oil prices crisis and stuff like this, so I feel like we all are more in touch. But there are more critical resources, and we also published an article on the not so rare earth minerals. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 materials that sit at the heart of modern technology, from smartphones and electric vehicles to renewable energy systems and advanced weapons platforms. While their names may be unfamiliar, although some of them are fairly familiar if you're using a phone, you're using coltan, there's also tungsten, there's wolfram. Their applications are basically everywhere, especially in high-powered magnets, batteries, electronics, and defense systems. They are not truly rare, but these elements are really difficult, costly, and environmentally damaging to extract and process. Greenland, for example, has its environmental rights protected so that they don't exploit the rare earth minerals there. But who did not care that much about this? Well, China. And China was allowed to dominate the sector through decades of state investments, subsidies, and relaxed environmental standards. And it now controls roughly 70% of the global extraction and around 90% of the global processing of rare earth minerals, which are one of their biggest, if not their biggest assets in today's geoeconomic competition. China controls this, and China has been in this power competition between the United States and China. There's been an escalation. When the United States imposed the tariffs on China, China reacted by limiting the amount of rare earth minerals that could be sent in the international market, therefore basically creating a scarcity like OPEC with oil in the 70s. This has been a wake-up call for many countries. Japan already had its issues with China in the 2010s decade, so they already started detaching from their and finding other sources of rare earth minerals to be able to keep up with their technological development and not depend on China. But the United States and Europe have been lagging in this. So now they are quickly trying to look for alternatives, and this is not as easy because, again, the extraction of these resources is really, really difficult. However, there's been one conflict that I think exemplifies this year this dependence and the importance of rare earth minerals, and also the importance of looking beyond the headline of a conflict. And I'm talking about the fighting that has been ongoing in East DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Just to have a bit of a glimpse, there's a rebel group that it's called M23 that is supposed to be backed by Rwanda, and that it's most probably backed by Rwanda. It acts as a proxy force, and they basically, although they have a presence in East DRC, but they basically invaded two regions, North and South Kivu, and managed to seize its two largest cities in the region. Now, this led to a bloodbath that at one point, international voices were saying that this had to stop, blah, blah, but at one point, the American administration fought its way through as a negotiator, and they managed to break a ceasefire between Rwanda and Kinshasa, the DRC. Now, M23 is not Rwanda. Therefore, they kept continuing, and they invaded another city, which is called, and they took over another city, which is called Uvira. Literally 3 days after the ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States happens between the governments of Rwanda and DRC. They take over this city, and then according to the reports, because of pressures of the United States, they've given it back, but it's probably with concessions. They probably just use their footprints. Now, this is a conflict that it's really, really important for global trade, and this is, in my opinion, why the United States got involved. What is there in SDRC? Well, in SDRC, you have one of the largest deposits of all the kinds of rare earth minerals that you can imagine on Earth. And there's already mining going on in there. Many of it illegal. Maybe growing up, you heard that about these coltan mines that were completely illegal, and like your phone has a small kid that was put on a mine, and you pay this money and they pay the kid this much money. Well, this is the East DRC. This is that area around the cities of Goma and Kivu. Around the cities of Goma and Bukavu. There is also a matter of ethnic tensions. M23 is Tutsi, and they were created after the genocide, after the genocide in Rwanda. They've been moving through DRC and Rwanda, and they say that they are there to protect their ethnic group interests. However, in geopolitics, one has to look further, and one has to look at why this region, why it is, and it's because they can control this mining. Kinshasa, the capital of DRC, has basically zero control over the east part of the country. It's divided between the rainforest. It's divided by the rainforest, and there's only one rail that goes from the capital to the east. Therefore, this area basically has to be self-sufficient because there's no... The government has zero capacity to project its power over this part, apart from the fact that DRC is one of the poorest countries in Africa, therefore one of the poorest countries in the world. So Rwanda, which is a more stable country, and their president that has been there for 20 years, we call it president. This basically, if you see it from a geopolitical perspective, it's an opportunity for Rwanda to exploit these minerals that are in the East DRC in a moment when these minerals are completely needed by any country in the world. Like right now, even the European Union would close their eyes to the source of these minerals just for the sake of having them and not be dependent on China. and they saw the opportunity to seize these mining parts. What is the United States looking from there? Well, to get obviously also agreements to get these rare earth minerals. So what we are seeing is a conflict that is mostly outside of the radar of the mainstream media, but that is clearly it's clearly, at least in my opinion, clearly happening because of the needs of our economies. It's the needs of the needs of electrifying our economies, particularly in Europe. I don't know if you want to make any comment about this, Matt.
Are you surprised that this hasn't gotten more international press? I mean, there's always I think there's an old Seinfeld joke that basically says no matter how much stuff happens in the world, it all still fits in one newspaper. But basically the idea is some stories don't get written about because more interesting or important things are going on. And obviously there's some major, Ukraine, Gaza headlines going on. But at the same time, as you pointed out, this is not just a conflict that is kind of, based on local grievances or ethnicities or whatever. This affects global economics. And like it or not, when global economics is affected, people start talking about it. So as you say, it's one of the reasons that U.S. got involved. Are you surprised that this hasn't gotten more kind of press over the year, or do you think there's just too much going on in 2025?
Let me answer with a question. I'm really sorry. Do you think, how many times have you seen in mainstream media that a conflict, any conflict that we've seen, was motivated for economic reasons? The reasoning that there's always portrayed in the media, in mainstream broadcasting, is ethnic tensions or historical grievances or religious grievances. You basically never will hear that it's an economic matter. Case example, Kuwait. When Saddam invades Kuwait, then the United States goes and defends Kuwait. Why did the United States defend Kuwait? Because it's the protector of freedom? No, because Kuwait has a really large oil production that the United States could get a favorable treatment if they help Kuwait defend themselves from Saddam. And honestly, looking in after all this time, it makes sense. For the United States was a victory. You get really good quality oil at a better condition because you saved this country from being invaded. But you will never hear it in the news of the time that the United States were doing this for the oil. As we were mentioning before with Russia, in my opinion, is gonna have to accept the resource-rich East Ukraine as a victory for themselves. Like, I'm not saying that this is what I want to happen, but like, if they want to sell something to their public, it's going to be that they got the resource-rich part of Ukraine. However, at this point, I think that it had to be their mentality, because if not, I don't understand what they're looking for. But they will never talk about this in the mainstream media. So I'd say when you have conflicts, first of all, in Africa. Second of all, really complicated. There's Tutsis, there's different ethnic groups now, but we like Rwanda because it's a stable country, and poor Rwanda because it had the genocide, but there's been a dictator there for 30 years, but it's our ally because it's stable. But then there's the DRC, that the DRC is really poor, colonial issues all over the place. Usually mainstream media doesn't go there because it doesn't give us the clicks, it doesn't give us the notoriety that we want. Two other conflicts that are right now happening, that are not getting basically media coverage except sporadically. Sudan, which is not getting much, like, obviously we know about it, we read about it. I read about Sudan basically every day. There's something happening, and it's really mortifying to see. The United Nations has called it the worst humanitarian crisis of the 21st century, because of the level of violence and the level of displaced people. But at least even Sudan, we've been reading something about it for us. Have you read anything about Yemen?
Not recently, right?
Ah, well, in Yemen, there's stuff going on. In Yemen right now, the Saudis and the Emiratis are backing different sides and they're going full on. And the Saudis went with the tanks, with their own tanks, entered Yemen. This is not in the media. So it's just a choice, as you say. I think it will go more of a choice on what you said in like, what is closer? What does it actually interest our people? It's Israel with Palestine. It's Ukraine, but also Ukraine can lose the focus for something else. And honestly, when you have constant public battles between Donald Trump and another global leader, it will obviously take the headlines. So all these conflicts just get forgotten. Not forgotten because people that are there, they know about.
So what I hear you saying is two things. One, that probably some people are happy to not have it in the news because
Yes.
they don't want to highlight horrible mining conditions that all of us are sitting here using on our smartphones and our laptops and our recording equipment. And two, that if people want good, long form, in depth news coverage, they should tune into something like the Geopolitical Pickle and read our newsletter because we're going to give them something like that.
You read my mind, Matt. You read my mind. So sign up for the Geopolitical Pickle in its podcast version and sign up for the Pickle Gazette. So yeah, just keep in mind, rare earth minerals have been here in 2025 and they're gonna be there in 2026 and continuing. So now let's go with two more topics and we end this Christmas special, end of the year special, let's call it, because there's gonna be two parts and one of them is probably gonna be this part is probably gonna be released after New Year's. And let's go with the article that we released earlier this year. Money is the new muscle, the rise of geoeconomics. Here we don't want to make a big explanation because we've had a newsletter article on it. We've had one really interesting interview that we did to Antonia Colibasanu. I highly recommend you to go back to that episode. She's an expert in the topic and she explains it so well that I really don't want to talk about it and just trash what she said because I would feel really bad and she would tell me, Juanfrey, that was not okay.
I took her geoeconomics class last semester and she is absolutely fantastic. She just says it the way it is and you just come out of that class just feeling like you understand so much more of what's going on.
Just for you to have a couple of headlines that you can go to the articles and episodes to check. This year, we explained what are the geoeconomic tools of power, such as sanctions, foreign direct investment, tariffs, debt diplomacy, or free trade agreements, and how countries use them to pursue their geopolitical goals. We also mentioned that the position of the big powers in this of the great powers in geoeconomics. China has built an immense geoeconomic influence through trade, manufacturing, large-scale initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, and as we were mentioning right before, the world's dependency on rare earth minerals. Russia has its geoeconomic power residing in the heavily energy exports and its ability to weaponize oil and gas supply, as is seen in the past disputes with Ukraine and Europe. Although this dependence leaves Moscow structurally vulnerable to being able to sell these. And then there's the European Union, which represents a different model of geoeconomic power and leverages the size of its internal market, trade agreements and regulatory risks, and sanctions to shape global outcomes. Basically, as their military power remains largely outside its near goals, the European Union has increasingly embraced a geoeconomic turn using economic pressure to pursue strategic objectives. And then there is the king of kings, which is the United States. The United States remains the most formidable geoeconomic actor. It's anchored by the dominance of the US dollar, which is critical. And we've spoken that BRICS wants to challenge this, but it is really difficult and has provided the US a position of dominance in global trade for the past 100 years, basically. Well, 80. It's access to global financial markets, leadership in strategic technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. I don't know if you want to make any comment on this because we've been talking about geoeconomics for the episode and the previous episode, actually. We've talked about the tariffs. We've talked about BRICS. I don't know if you would like to add anything else.
Yeah, the word of the year might be tariffs, right? Like it is in terms of one thing to explain 2025, that could be it. Because it wasn't like it was Liberation Day, whenever it was in April, which is a really dumb name if I have to talk about names. And it's ongoing. It basically Trump like flipped over the board, and then everyone came in various ways and tried to make deals. And some of them seem more successful, some of them not. We talked about, I think, last episode that we're not even sure if these are legally allowed. It's still working its way through the U.S. courts. Tariffs are meant to be a congressional power, except for in emergency circumstances. And these emergencies aren't real emergencies. So this is going to be the big story into 2026 because, as people know in economics, this stuff doesn't take place overnight, right? It really takes a long time for things to really come into fray in terms of how this is going to affect world economies, the U.S.'s economy. And we're going to see if it's going to really shake what's happening, which would be very difficult for Trump and the Republicans coming up into the 2026 midterm next November in 2026. Or if things will kind of stabilize around it, if people will start working with other partners, if people are going to start trying to just kind of cut the U.S. out of things and say, can we all just go along with the rules we were going with and stop messing around with these tariffs? It is going to become, I think, still the story of next year. But right now, all the pieces are just up in the air. The board is still flipped over, and we don't know where they're going to land.
I like the table is flipped over. I think it's a good analogy of a good metaphor of what's happening of 2025. The year of the board flip over. We can call it like this, the title of the episode. I don't know.
That's right. I think that's right.
It's something like that. Okay, so finally, and this will be the last topic that we will be touching today, we also introduced another series in our newsletter that is called The Threats in the Contemporary World. So, Matt, would you like to drive us through one of the topics that we touched upon?
Sure. Let's end this episode on the lightest topic possible, which is a nuclear bomb. And so the episode is called Return of the Bomb, and it's a nuclear issue. And again, people thought this was kind of Cold War stuff. This is over. No one's really been proliferating outside of North Korea, which is sort of a special case. But it's now front and center, right? There's decades like the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the START agreements, which are helping reduce global stockpiles, stabilize deterrence. There's mutually assured destruction, which still exists. Obviously, there's a ton of warheads, thousands within Russia, thousands within America, less so in China, Great Britain, France, India, Pakistan, and North Korea, and then add Israel, if you believe, like most people do, that Israel also possesses nuclear weapons. But again, that's a really small number of countries that have nuclear weapons across the 190 or so countries in the world. And some of them have given them up, right? Libya, you talked about earlier, Ukraine after USSR disbanded. Even countries like South Africa have basically said, "Hey, we're not gonna do this." It seemed to be fine. And of course, like everything else in this board flipping year that we've gone through, it's not quite doing so well because the erosions of these arms control agreements are happening. And there's no real idea that the US, China, and Russia are going to come together to make new treaties. We're just not on speaking terms in that area of cooperation, nor do any of these powers seem to want to, is I think the bigger problem. And regional powers are now going to start looking and reassessing these things. It's pretty easy to leave the non-proliferation treaty. You just say, hey, we're leaving it. I mean, South Korea has made rumblings about starting one as a deterrent to North Korea. Even someone like the Japanese, the Japanese have great nuclear energy technology. They're thinking about things. And moving back to where we are stationed here in Europe is, say what you will about NATO and the conventional military forces, which we've talked about, but the big thing that happens in NATO is the U.S. nuclear umbrella, because the U.S. basically, since the Cold War, has said we will be protecting Europe from the nuclear threat of Russia. Europe, Canada, and even though there are other nuclear armed powers, France and Great Britain within the NATO alliance, that has been the key overarching umbrella, because like it or not, a nuclear bomb is the ultimate trump card. It's the one thing that can really destroy massive amounts of humanity in one go. Now everyone's questioning whether this nuclear umbrella is still with it, right? Would Trump be willing to defend Norway, a country he seems to like, France, a country he doesn't seem to like, some of these other countries?
I don't blame him.
As a good Spaniard, that's fair. So then Europe's talking about rearming, right? France wants to be the nuclear umbrella potentially because they've always had ambitions in Europe in terms of being kind of the main military power. And so then you go and you talk about Iran, which is the big story that happened in 2025. Iran has been trying to secure its future by becoming a nuclear power. They saw what happened to Libya. Libya gave up nuclear arms under Gaddafi. Gaddafi is no more, and he's a brutal dictator that met a brutal end. North Korea, on the other hand, no one can mess with them because they have a nuclear capability, a proven nuclear capability. They've done plenty of testing. Iran's trying to do the same thing. These are old regime members. They know they want to hang on to power, and they know that the surest way to do that is by building a nuclear bomb. Now, there's been efforts to try to curb this. The JCPOA back in the Obama administration that Trump just blew up when he was in his first term that was trying to stop Iran from enriching. And now we're just going straight back to preemptive strikes. So in June, Israel secretly bombed a huge nuclear facility, and then convinced Trump, who first said he didn't know anything about it, and then said he did know something about it, and then said it was his idea, and then Bibi Netanyahu convinced Trump to use the one thing that Iran or that Israel didn't have, which was this bunker buster bomb, this one that could really go deep, and basically got the U.S. to go in and finish the job. Now, how much it set back the nuclear program of Iran is up for debate. I don't think we'll know that necessarily. I think there's been some preliminary reports. It did something. It set back it something, of course. But then the question becomes this is a fascinating issue because the only reason Israel was able to do this in the first place is because Iran was in such a weakened position, right? Like, they're not really supporting Hamas, and Hamas was on the defensive in Gaza. Hezbollah was also in tatters, and they're basically kind of over and done with. If you remember, there was a huge spy campaign where they blew up a bunch of Hezbollah members via beepers and cell phones, burner cell phones, which was a crazy kind of one-off story that showed the effectiveness of Israeli intelligence. So Iran is in a weakened position. They don't have proxies to hurt Israel. Israel sees this as a perfect time to take out the one thing that Iran can do to really threaten it, which is a nuclear program. So if you look at it from a just realist strategic perspective, it was probably the perfect and only time that Israel could have made this move. And the cherry on top was convincing their greatest and kind of only one real major ally remaining to go in and actually make sure that they push it back as much as possible. Now, we haven't really seen the repercussions of this. We don't know how Iran's going to respond. They kind of made a show of sending in some bombs that got easily destroyed by Israeli defensive mechanisms. But we don't know if Iran's regrouping. We don't know if they're going to try to rush to make a bomb to basically get it. And then once you have it, you're at the nuclear table, and then no one's going to really mess with you, right? This is the North Korea example. Or if this gambit kind of worked, and even if we don't like it, even if we don't like the fact that there is incursions into another sovereign nation's territory and blowing up facilities and killing people and scientists, maybe this makes the world safer. I think it's kind of an open question for 2025, even if you take out the moralistic implications of was this a good move for Israel and the U.S. vis-a-vis Iran? Was this better than diplomatic talks and treaty agreements? Was at the end of the day, is it just better to take something out before it exists? And it's kind of been lost, to be honest, because we've had so much more in the news, and it happened about halfway through the year. But yeah, I mean, in terms of nuclear actions, this might have been the most important story of 2025.
I would agree. I would agree. Also, the reports that I saw coming from Iran were that, well, not even coming from Iran, I think it was the British intelligence, that they were saying that the bunkers where all this development was taking place, they dropped six bombs in one of them, so it didn't really set them back that far. It would take them a couple of years in that specific area. So we would see whether if this encourages the Iran's leadership to actually get the bomb for as an existential need, or if it will set them back and not try it again. in the past 4 years, 3 years, sorry, since the invasion of Ukraine, we've talked a lot about nuclear weapons, and we've talked about the possibility of, we've talked about strategic nuclear weapons, we've talked about different kinds. But yeah, this year, this is what happened, and I just want to remark, as you were mentioning before, that the agreement between Russia and the United States to control their nuclear arsenals expires this year, so they should be signing it again in 2026, which is, it does not look like they're gonna sign it, but there's not much talk about it, which in itself, in my opinion, it's a bit bad. Anyway.
Un poco malo, you might say.
Un poco malo. Yes. Sometimes I forget that I'm speaking English and I cannot finish the sentence. Matt, what a year, 2025 that we've had. What is there any event that you are like, oh, I wasn't expecting this and this really shocked me?
You know, that's a good question. I will say that I am really happy that we've done 2+ hours of geopolitics and have not had to mention AI, because it's a whole, not just 2 hours, it's a whole semester's worth of classes. There's so many podcasts out there, and it's kind of nice to just step back and talk about old school, great powers, states, and all these things, because truly 2025 is not the year AI really did anything. We're just sort of looking into the future and trying to figure out what it is, right? There's a lot of speculation, a lot of we don't know, a lot of possibilities, a lot of doomsday sort of things, but we're still on the predictive side of things rather than truly seeing what's going on. And it was kind of nice to take a step back from my Terminator 2 sort of mindset that, we only have a couple of years left before Skynet, and just focus on easy issues like Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, great power relations, because that is it. That story and some of the stuff that comes out of AIs lying to their creators and trying to outsmart things is absolutely eye-opening, if not terrifying.
What's the thing? We do have an episode about geopolitics of AI. Not about AI in itself, but about the geopolitics that go behind. I remember that there is one of the companies that is involved in Terminator I don't know exactly what is the name of the company, because there's Skynet, but Skynet is the program in itself. No?
Yeah.
There's the company that produces it. I don't know exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
I don't know. I don't know exactly, because I watched the movies many years ago. But I remember reading when all this Elon Musk and Grok thing was going on, that they were saying, I don't know why, in Twitter I read it. That one of the companies that is investing in AI has the same name as one of the companies that developed the Terminator robots and stuff.
Why?
I cannot confirm this. I read it on Twitter. There's world leaders nowadays that consider what Twitter says to be truth. So I'm gonna take it as a truth, but because I want to end up with a bit more relaxed thought, I would like to thank everybody that has been following us this year, just as the previous years. We're really delighted with your support. Don't forget to like these episodes. Don't forget to like the newsletter. Don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or with that person that tells you that they know better about geopolitics than you. Well, tell them that they are wrong because we said so. And with this, I can only tell you, Matt, thank you very much for being in this really long episode. You've overcome Ronan as the longest speaker here, because 2 hours and a half we've been here, more than 2 hours, 2:45. I think with Ronan, the tops we've done is 1 hour and 30 minutes. So this has been a pleasure. And I would like to wish you all a great end of the year, and we'll see you again in 2026.
Happy New Year, everybody.
The Geopolitical Pickle is created by Ronan Wordsworth and Juan Francisco Muñoz. Follow us on Instagram at The Geopolitical Pickle or Twitter at The Geopickle for more content, and follow us on every podcast platform.